Okay, so I think we'll get started. It's just after 11. So hello to everyone joining us today. Thank you for joining our regular Friday webinar series. And today we have the pleasure of welcoming a guest speaker, Nolana Neubauer, who you can see there, who will be sharing her research related to wandering and getting lost, a review of at-home strategies you can use to manage the risk. And Nolana is joining us today from a top secret location in Edmonton. So Nolana Neubauer is a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Waterloo, and she is also an occupational therapy student at University of Alberta. Nolana completed her PhD in rehabilitation science at University of Alberta in August 2019 under the supervision of Dr. Lily Liu, where she focused on developing a framework and guidelines to manage the risks associated with critical dementia-related wandering. She is the co-founder of the International Consortium on Dementia, and I think she'll be sharing some exciting stuff about that later on. Dementia and Wayfinding, and is highly qualified personnel with AGE, AgeWell NCE. Her research interests include dementia, wayfinding, assistive technologies, and aging in place. So once the presentation is completed, we will open things up for a moderated Q&A. And if you haven't used this Zoom platform before, you will see there is a chat at the bottom of the screen. So if you have any questions about technology, and we might use that a little bit differently in the middle of the presentation, you can send us a message there. And if you have any questions for Nolana that we'll have for the Q&A, please enter them in the Q&A box, which you'll see at the bottom, and we will address those at the end of the presentation. So thank you very much, Nolana.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Susan, for the introduction. Of course, I always like to share first off, why am I doing two different things at once? So as Susan had shared, I am a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Waterloo, and I am an OT student at the University of Alberta. I guess I loved school so much after I did my PhD, and actually fell in love with an occupational therapy that I felt that being able to have a clinical background, in addition to me being able to continue my work within this amazing research field, was definitely a good idea. So I'm presently finishing my first year in COVID times as an OT student, while also exploring the realms of this world within my research as we continue our different social distancing. So it's been definitely an interesting roller coaster over the last little while, like I'm sure it is for most of us. So the learning objectives for this webinar. So hopefully during this webinar, I hope you will all be able to discover what exactly wandering behavior is, if you don't know what it is already. You'll be able to learn about the risks that are associated with wandering and getting lost. And you'll also be able to identify strategies that you can potentially use to manage the risks. So before I get started on this topic, I always like to share who the research team is that I'm a part of. So all of our work, it's being done under the lead of Dr. Lily Liu. So Lily, when I did my PhD, was the department head, so she was chair of the Department of Occupational Therapy at the University of Alberta. And then as of last summer, she became the Dean of Applied Health Sciences at the University of Waterloo. So she's right in the neighborhood of where many of you are. In addition to this, we work alongside Dr. Antonio Mingle Cruz. He is an engineer from Colombia, and he's come up to Alberta to work alongside his wife, who is also an occupational therapist out of the U of A. We also have Dr. Christine Dom, who's an OT, so you're starting to see a theme of many OTs are engineers. So Christine has tons and tons of years of experience working within long-term care. And of course, her interest is similar to ours in terms of dementia. And then of course, there's myself. And then I also always like to try to share the values and the beliefs about the research and even the program that myself and my colleagues follow by. So when you look at researchers, many people they tend to be afraid of us. They think that we're the ones that sit in our ivory towers and we're the ones that dictate where things go, and we only bring in participants when we need them, and then we kind of split them off to the side. And our team is the exact opposite of that. We're really trying to change that image as to how researchers operate. For us, we truly believe in something called participatory approaches. So for us, and a lot of the research that I'll be sharing with you today, it didn't come from us in terms of coming up with the question and the problem. What we do is we have a very close relationship with many different types of stakeholders from across the country and around the world, from the local Alzheimer's societies to persons living with dementia, to the police, clinicians, you name it. And they actually come forward with us with the problem, and then we always try to work together as equals to be able to come up with a solution. And of course, when we end up working on things, we also like to try to address it from multiple solutions and multiple angles. So while we do really try to focus on involving the voices of the person with dementia, when we're talking about strategies and we're talking about various technologies, while including their voice is amazing, we also need to keep in mind all the other influencing factors that may influence how a person with dementia might adopt a given strategy or technology. Same thing with the care partner. So we have the person with dementia we can see on this graph here is the individual, but again, we have to keep in mind their friends, their families, their social networks, because that can have an influence on the strategies that they use. Then bringing it up a level, the community organizations such as the Alzheimer's societies have been absolutely critical in the work that we've done over the last couple of years. And then of course, public policy tends to be something that we put on the side, but at the end of the day, when we're looking at various different types of strategies, who is going to be able to fund these different types of technologies and techniques? And of course, that's where policy ends up coming in. So what you're going to see throughout the course of this webinar is that we do try to involve all of these different sectors when we're doing our work, just to truly make sure that it does have a significant impact on this population when we are addressing wandering and getting lost. So before, again, it's just try to give you a little bit more information on my background, who I am. So I'm bringing in the Finding Your Way program. So the Finding Your Way program really was something that brought me into this entire journey back in 2015. I'm sure that many of you know the Finding Your Way program. It is pretty much the only program of its nature in all of Canada. And the fact that it focuses on different strategies, different ways that people can try to stay safe in their communities when we're addressing wandering and getting lost. And they have been truly foundational in the work that I have done. And my story really started more specifically within 2016 at the Locating Technology Forum. So myself and Dr. Lily Liu, we were invited to help run this forum just with our background within locating technologies and getting lost. And we helped run this, and it was a very successful event. And I myself was quite new to this field. I had only started my PhD a year ago, and I was still trying to figure out what can I do that's going to have an influencing factor when I was trying to figure out what my dissertation would be. And really, this event is what did it for me. It was the fact that it was very interdisciplinary. We had police officers, we had clinicians, lived experience, all in the same room. And I was just absolutely fascinated by the discussions that unfolded. And so really, some of those discussions actually turned into what my doctoral thesis was. And from this Locating Technology forum as well, something that was a first for me was to be able to actually publish a paper, not with just academics, but to be able to include others, such as Kathy Conway, who was one of the co-founders of the Finding Your Way program. Same thing with Ron Bellino, who I'm sure many of you might know, who was an advocate. He was a care partner to his father, who had Alzheimer's disease for 10 years. And so really, it wasn't just the academics that were publishing a paper. It was all of us working together as a team. And this publication was from that forum and the findings and the discussions that we had. So it really kind of gives you hopefully an understanding as to what we're doing and where we're about to go. So of course, the topic that we're talking about today is wandering and getting lost. So I always like to use this slide just because it really shows the severity of the issue and just why it's something that I'm very passionate about. So all of these news clippings that you see here, all of them except for one, are ones that I've pulled up. I pulled them up about 2 days ago. And then basically they were over the last 4 months. And you can see that there was actually a missing persons case in London last month of an 84-year-old man that went missing. And as we can see from these different news article clippings, again, it's while there might be happy outcomes where people are able to be found, unfortunately, there are not so happy outcomes when the person with dementia has been lost. The one case that I continually like to share is the case of Shin No from Coquitlam, BC. So essentially Shin, he went missing back in 2013 and his remains have yet to be found, and it's currently 2020. And it was a very unfortunate event because his family wasn't aware that Shin was getting lost. And the first time that he ever did get lost was the last time he was ever found. And it was something that actually ended up sparking a community alert system called the BC Silver Alert that his son, Sam No, is currently running to this day. So we can really see that while there's positive outcomes, unfortunately, we really need to try to address finding these individuals as quickly as possible, just because the mortality rate is quite high. If someone with dementia has gotten lost and has gone missing and hasn't been found within 24 hours, it's estimated that approximately 50% will experience severe injury or death. So again, it really shows the urgency when we're trying to address this. So the big question that we always end up getting is, okay, great, I looked up news article clippings, but really, what are the numbers? What are the stats? So currently, the only stat that we tend to use, and you might have heard of it, is that 3 in 5 persons with dementia will critically wander and become lost. This number, unfortunately, is a number that came from the Alzheimer's Association. And really, we have no idea where that number came from. We don't know, is it recurring events? Was it just a one-time event? We don't know any of this type of information. So this has really turned into a mission among myself and among Dr. Lily Liu in terms of really, what are we looking at? How many people with dementia are truly getting lost and going missing across the country? So a project that I ended up doing alongside the Finding a Way program back in 2018 was I actually did a series of interviews with police officers throughout the province of Ontario. And while they're not necessarily collecting the information, something that I was quite shocked to hear, when I did these interviews, I just asked them, from those that were receiving these calls or the ones that were going on the ground trying to find them, on average, if they could give me any information in terms of range, frequency, trend, anything, just so we had something to build off of. And so this was really what kind of came out of me having those different interview discussions. So I was able to split it across the different regions within Ontario. And what we can see, at least within the ranges, is that across the board, it is quite high. It is estimated that about 30 to 50% of the missing calls that a lot of our officers within Ontario are dealing with are actually involving an older adult or an older adult that's living with dementia, which is something that I was quite shocked to hear. In terms of frequency, one that I've been using over the last 2 years since I heard of it was the Toronto region, for example. Their police officers get between 5 to 7 calls a day, so every 24 hours involves this population. So that is a lot. And then everyone is saying that, of course, they're seeing a drastic trend in terms of the number of missing incidences. And we all knew that this was going to happen because as our population ages, as more people are being diagnosed with dementia, unfortunately, there's going to be more missing persons cases. But the big question, though, is when we're looking at this, again, another question is the prevalence truly underestimated? Because while what the police are receiving, we all know that there might have been many there might have been many missing incidences that didn't involve the police. Perhaps the loved one ended up going out into the community and then the family was able to find them right away. So there was a wonderful article that was recently published, and it was done by Karen Shalev-Green, who is a part of that consortium that I will talk about a bit later. And basically what they did was they ended up interviewing a ton of different family members in the United Kingdom, and they just asked them, why are they not calling the police? And what they ended up finding was really, most people had assumed that there was this assumption that they had to wait 24 hours to call the police. They all think, and I'm even the same one, I think that it comes in many cases from different TV shows and that you think, oh, I have to wait, when really there's that massive urgency behind there. And from this article as well, what Karen had found was that there is still, unfortunately, a feeling of embarrassment and guilt. When someone with dementia does get lost and go missing, you feel that it's your fault. You didn't do enough. You didn't take care of them. And then you feel that once they're found, then it's reflecting on who you are. So there's a fear of the disapproval or judgment by the police that you just weren't doing your job properly, which is unfortunate. And then, of course, there was the fear of the negative reactions by the persons with dementia. Unfortunately, the police aren't really being educated a whole lot about it. And so there's a lot of fear that how is my loved one going to be treated if I end up calling the police and they find them? And then, of course, there's a massive distrust of police and the desire to protect their relative. It's just, especially within various different cultures, sometimes we might not necessarily trust the police. We don't think that they know enough, so we don't want to involve them. But really, at the end of the day, at least from this article, is that we cannot underreport it. We need to call the police right away. And again, I'm going to be describing that as some of the strategies. So before I go on a little bit further, I always like to try to add a little bit more engagement to my webinars. So because this issue is very near and dear to probably many of you, I would like you to please feel free to share in the chat box. Do you have any experiences that are related to someone with dementia that had wandered, was lost, and was missing? And even feel free to describe how this topic might have made you feel. And I'll give you all about like a minute or so to see if you want to type in and share your responses. If not, I can share a couple myself. But I always just like to hear some of the experiences of others.
If you do want to type in the chat box that you want to share a story, we can also unmute you so you can share it with the group.
Do you have anyone that has an experience they might want to share? If you don't, that's okay.
Okay, we'll leave it to you, Nolana.
I think we have someone on the chat. So we have Amanda said that one patient left at 1 a.m. and was found 4 hours later and was found approximately 2 to 3 kilometers away from home. That's something that I've actually heard that's been quite common. And it's incredible as well when we think that someone with dementia, we don't think that they go quite far away, but these individuals can walk, yeah, like multiple kilometers away from where they were last seen. And I know that's quite stressful. And with that sundowning period in the middle of the night, it always tends to be something that's the most stressful for many different clinicians and care partners, just especially within care homes or even with clients. I know that a lot of care partners end up having to sleep at home and they're trying to figure out different locks and different ways of trying to keep them safe, just because if they're sleeping, they're afraid that they're going to go out that door. Does anyone have any other experiences they might want to share? So some of the ones that I can even share with you, just from hearing from the stories throughout the consortium, is that those that get lost, well, they might be found within 2 to 3 kilometers away from the facility or from their home. There has been many cases that they've actually gone very vast distances that you wouldn't expect. So when I was speaking to one care partner, there was an incident in BC where they actually ended up getting lost in Vancouver. The gentleman was able to hop onto a Greyhound bus without any shoes. No one seemed to question why he was going on, wasn't prepared, but they ended up finding him in Calgary, all by going onto a Greyhound bus. So I thought that was quite shocking. There's another one that was shared by Elizabeth. So fortunately, we have lived in our neighborhood for quite some time and have a close relationship with our neighbors. I was in the basement doing laundry. My husband couldn't find me and went next door to ask the neighbors if they'd seen me. A good outcome, fortunately, but I'm concerned if he had just wandered away instead of going next door. That's a very good point. That's a good story as well. So as we can see, there's many different stories that everyone has to say, and there's always different outcomes. But again, we just always have to be aware of just how common this issue is going on and just how differently things can be approached. So I already started to allude to this a little bit, but what exactly are the causes? So when we're looking at wandering and getting lost, of course, the biggest one is that unfortunately with many of those that live with dementia, one of the hallmarks, especially with those with Alzheimer's disease, is that unfortunately you end up having a decreased ability of being able to navigate in space, an inability of being able to know where you are. And when people progress further within their dementia journey, in many cases, I myself, even when I navigate within my neighborhood, I use landmarks. I don't use street names. And so when they go further along on their journey, they might no longer recognize those landmarks because they had changed over the years. So that's something that we always have to be quite aware of. And then as well, the different causes of getting lost also come down to stress that come with a person with dementia. In many cases, they have the inability, when they lose their ability to be able to communicate what they want, or if they're in a stressful environment, like many of us, we want to be able to dart and get away from that stressful environment. And so sometimes that's the reason why the person with dementia might go out. And then as well, just trying to look at the balance in terms of their judgment that the people have. So as they progress further within their experience of dementia, unfortunately, they might end up going to places they wouldn't necessarily always go into. They might go into more dangerous places just because of that lack of judgment that does tend to come alongside with the disease. And then, of course, what are the risks of getting lost? So we know that it can cause issues in terms of risk of injury, also in terms of stress, especially for the care partner. I had heard stories of care partners where they would actually end up tying their loved one with a string to themselves in their bed just for fear that they were going to go out into the community at night. I know a lot of care partners wouldn't sleep at all, just again because of that fear, or they'd end up quitting their jobs and staying at home to try to give that 24-hour surveillance. And then unfortunately, there are many incidences that can result in them being found deceased. And of course, this is something that we're always trying to work away from. But then something that's different that I want us to be able to shift is, so great, what are the risks of wandering? What are the risks of going missing? But then also, what are the risks of restricting wandering? So this is starting to be a change in terms of terminology. So while the wandering behavior itself it can lead to getting lost, there are many benefits that can come with a person with dementia wandering. So being able to be one with nature, being able to go for walks. I know that that's something that's very important to many of the persons with dementia I've spoken to. As well, wandering behavior allows for that sense of expression. So if they're nonverbal, it gives them the ability of being able to talk to, or being able to express their unmet needs to their care partner or a facility that they're living in. As well, if we're restricting their ability to wander, they can't go out in the community, they can't be with their friends, they can't socialize. It, as well as autonomy, wandering gives them that sense of autonomy. And then as well, just even being able to go to a coffee shop, restricting wandering, that causes the elimination of all these potential positives. So while we're trying to keep them as safe as possible, we're causing all these different key components that are very important to the person with dementia, and we're getting rid of that from them. So really, we're trying to, at least within my work, is we're trying to shift this culture in terms of not completely restricting wandering. So to give you a little bit more context, so the wandering terminology, I'm sure many of you have heard of wandering, and then the question always comes to use or not to use. So there's always this challenge or the assumption that dementia-related wandering is something that is aimless. But what I have learned is that wandering isn't necessarily aimless behavior. It has all those benefits that I just described. In addition to this, there's this confusion between wandering and getting lost. So while wandering behavior certainly can lead to getting lost, it's not necessarily always the case. But when the person does transgress, they're out in the community, they are lost, rather than just using the wandering terminology itself, at least we as scientists, we call this critical wandering. So this is when they're at risk of potentially something happening to them. And then, of course, there is a massive stigma that is attached to using the term wandering around the world. Since I started the Consortium 2 years ago, I have come to terms that different countries, such as the United Kingdom, they don't even use the term wandering. Same thing with Australia. Within the United Kingdom, they call it wayfinding, and I know within Australia, they call it walkabout. So it's something that, at least within my work, we're always trying to be cognizant of is what is the stigma, and even how can we change that stigma so maybe we could use wandering terminology again. And so to further build on wandering being more than aimless, I actually did a study during my PhD where I ended up interviewing various persons with dementia, clinicians, care partners, and I just asked them what they thought wandering behavior meant to them. And what I ended up finding, and it was amazing with my background and my schooling within occupational therapy, is that many felt that wandering behavior actually has a form of occupation that kind of comes with it. So I'm going to read 2 quotes for you. One of them came from an occupational therapist that I spoke to, and she said, "Any human being wants to go for a walk and doesn't just want to sit still. No one wants to be trapped inside. It's not that you're exit seeking. You just want the freedom to go and do whatever you want to." And that quote couldn't be any more real within COVID. At least with me being cooped up at home and only leaving my house once a week to get groceries, I'm feeling even more so that I'm feeling trapped. And it's giving me a better taste of what individuals with dementia have been going through this entire time. Another quote that came from one of the registered nurses, he had said, "We assume that we're not sleeping, but maybe their past job was a night supervisor. Sometimes they are in their mind reliving their past when we see them moving around. We need to try to identify what that could be." And that was found from many of the different conversations that I had. I came to learn that the wandering behavior that the person with dementia expressed, in many ways, it reflected what their past occupation was. So for example, there was a gentleman that was known to go out into his neighborhood and try to find buttons and pick up buttons all the time. And people always questioned why he did that. And then they came to learn that he actually used to work in the textile industry for 30 years. And so in a way, him picking up buttons almost reconnected him with who he once was. And that was absolutely fascinating. And it's just a different way of being able to look at this. And then hearing the perspective of someone with dementia, he had said, "Sometimes I like to walk out and about aimlessly. I'm just happy to be outside. At times, though, I forget where I am, and that's when I start to panic." So again, just being able to wander, being able to be out into the elements has that sense of purpose for an individual with dementia. So it's something that's very important. However, when they do get lost, then that's when the anxiety tends to come. So how do we manage that? And so all this starts to build into something that I ended up coining the Goldilocks principle on dementia and wayfinding. So again, while we need to see the risks that do come with wandering and potentially leading to getting lost, unfortunately, we automatically assume that we have to send them to a locked dementia units, we have to bring in locks. And unfortunately, from what I just described, is that it decreases many different benefits that come with the person with dementia. And as well, it decreases their autonomy quite significantly. So what I'm hoping within our future talks, even as you're talking to clients, clinicians, Alzheimer's societies, even among persons with dementia, really, how do we find this fine balance between independence and autonomy and safety? Because truly, if we find that fine balance between the two, we can keep the person with dementia safe, but we can still provide them with that ability of being able to get all those benefits that wandering behavior can have. So now on to the strategies. So this has been quite an exciting field. I've been invested in this within the last 5 years. And so this slide came from one of the first scoping reviews that I had conducted. And basically what a scoping review is we as researchers, we try to dig into the literature. We like to see what is published that's available to researchers and what is available by Google. And when I did this vast search and trying to see what are some high, so the really high tech strategies, and the low tech is like writing on a piece of paper, what type of strategies are currently out there to address wandering and getting lost? And so what I came through was I found that there was more than 183 different types of high tech. There's more than 142 different types of low tech. And this was back in 2017 when I conducted this. So that is a lot. And by being able to split them up into the low tech and the high tech, what we can see, of course, is that locating technologies was the most popular, both in the scholarly literature, so the green bar, and then the yellow, so the gray literature. And so, of course, that wasn't surprising because there's been a lot of hype, a lot of conversation about locating technologies potentially helping and trying to find someone that is potentially lost. Alarms and surveillance systems were another key component that I'm going to dive into a little bit further. And then, of course, within the low tech, there's different things such as distraction and redirection. But what we can see is that there were a ton out there, and there really needed to be a sense of a guideline. And I'll be able to discuss that a little bit later, because really this graph ended up inspiring me being able to develop a guideline to simplify all these strategies. And another question that I ended up having was, great, what is available in the literature? But I was just curious, what are people currently using right now? So when I was doing my PhD, I ended up doing a series of interviews, again, with the whole gamut of the different stakeholders, from social workers, formal caregivers, so those that work within facilities, police, clinicians, persons living with dementia. And what I was able to discover is that, of course, within the higher tech solutions, locating technologies was quite popular. However, you can split it up into two different components that I'll discuss a little bit later, where there's commercial locating, so the stuff that's more expensive that you have to purchase specifically for this aspect of getting lost. There's also phone locating that I'm going to discuss. It's quite interesting, as well as home alarm systems. And then as well, in terms of the lower tech strategies, so there's the distraction and redirection, and then there is also different types of registries that are available that people spoke of, or even signage, because keeping in mind that wandering, one of the signs is, or one of the reasons why they tend to wander or get lost is because their inability to be able to navigate. So signage sometimes ends up helping them just guide them to meet their needs. So I thought that was quite fascinating, as well as different identification strategies. So what we could see from at least those two slides before I really dive into the specifics is that there are a ton of different strategies out there. It's more than just GPS devices. And this slide just basically depicts what the research program has been that I've been involved in over the last couple of years, where of course you want to focus on locating devices because there is so much hype, because there's so much focus on this area, but then also keeping in mind the importance of dementia-friendly communities. So things like alert systems, like the Rapid Response Project that I'll discuss later. Risk reduction strategies such as guidelines, and even the awareness and education, which the Alzheimer's Society of London has been doing an amazing job, just in terms of trying to educate the public, such as webinars like this. So now to be able to dive a little bit deeper, so I want to note though that I am fortunate that I was invited to provide a more in-depth presentation in a couple weeks on locator devices, but I'm going to give you a little taste, so if you're interested in it, you'll be able to join in the next webinar next month. But basically, a lot of our work really stemmed all the way back into 2015 when I had first started. There was something called the GPS locator device study. So this study was funded through the Alberta Health Services, so our big government, the way that our healthcare is operated within the province of Alberta. And basically the purpose of this project was to be able to bring in a GPS company. So in this case, the company was called SafeTracks. SafeTracks is a Red Deer based company. So they're straddled right in the middle between Edmonton and Calgary. And then basically we tried to test the different versions of this device. So they had an insole, they had one that you could wear as a watch, and they also had a lanyard. And then basically what we did was we had a series of dyads, and by dyads we mean a person with dementia and their care partner. And we got them to trial the GPS device for a couple months. So we had more of an urban site, so we had people within Calgary, and then we had more of a rural site, so people within Grand Prairie, so far up north in Alberta. And we got them to trial it for 6 months, and this was an incredibly successful project. Overall, people were incredibly happy. They felt that their expectations were significantly met when they looked at it, and they felt that the usability of the technology was quite easy. And some amazing quotes that came from this project was that they felt that the use of a GPS device certainly gave them a sense of freedom and peace of mind, specifically for the care partner. They knew where their loved one was, so it gave them more of an ability to be able to still have their life while knowing where their loved one was. It provided them with a sense of security. For some, it gave them comfort to know where they were all the time. And then it also gave them peace of mind that if their loved one got mixed up or lost, that they would have a way of being able to locate them. And at the end of this study, which is something that we still share to this day, is that people loved these devices so much that it was actually unethical for us to be able to remove the device at the end of the study. So Alberta Health Services actually had to pay for the use of these devices up until the end when they didn't need it anymore. And this was the first time within the province's history that they actually ended up subsidizing and paying for technology that doesn't have Health Canada approval. So it was fascinating. And it's something that we tend to continue to talk about just in terms of its successes. And when I had mentioned in that one slide about the commercial locating, but then the phone locating, there's also phone locating ones such as you end up looking at an app called Life 360. Life 360 is free, and I know many persons with dementia that actually use it. It's quite interesting. And you yourself are able to see where the person with dementia is, but the person with dementia can see where you are. So there's almost a bit of that synonymous relationship. Same thing with the Find My Friend feature. For all of us iPhone users, so I am one of them, it's already embedded in my phone. So it's something that I know quite a few people use. And then as well, it doesn't have to be some fancy locating device that says for dementia. The GPS tile is something that's quite common. You can slip it almost anywhere, and it's something that people can use. So again, we always have to keep that in mind, but it's quite fascinating. And then, of course, there's something called the Technology Products Repository. That is something that my team did. Again, this was back in 2017 alongside the Alzheimer's Society of Ontario on just coming up with the hub with all the existing strategies in terms of GPS technologies. So we encourage all Canadian companies to upload their GPS product, and then basically you can compare them side by side. And again, I'm going to be describing this in a little bit more detail in the next webinar. So now moving on to alarms and surveillance systems. So within the literature and from what I had found, there's various different ways of being able to implement these strategies. So for example, you can have a basic door alarm, doesn't cost anything. It's not like some of the GPS devices that can cost hundreds of dollars. It can be a matter of costing $20 to be able to put it on your door. You can end up having different remote sensors. So if someone ends up moving within the room, then there can be an alarm that goes off. Pressure mats. So for you clinicians that are on the line, basically if someone gets out of bed, then there'd be an alarm that would go off, and these aren't very expensive either. And then there was another one that I never even thought of, but it came from me doing these interviews with the persons with dementia and their care partners. A lot of us have alarm systems in our home, just we don't want any burglars to come into our house. But the brilliant thing, and at least we have it within my house that I'm in right now, is that if you open up the door, then it announces that the door is open. Well, that was a way of being almost a strategy per se for a care partner, because they knew if it was them and their loved one, if the person with dementia went out the door, they'd know when that door opened. So again, it doesn't just have to be a GPS device. It could be something that could be super cheap, and it's still a strategy. And then as well, something that I don't promote, but it's still being used, is for the distraction and redirection strategies. We do have the different door murals. So basically you'd end up taking a basic door and you'd find ways of masking them. So then the person with dementia doesn't know that they can go out that door. So for example, we have this beautiful painting where it pretty much looks like a bookshelf instead of a door. So then they can bypass that. I've heard of other cases, such as an occupational therapist out east, that would end up prescribing being able to put in just a curtain and being able to put it across the door. Again, because then they wouldn't see that it's a door, so they'd bypass that. And then of course, there's the various different locks. But again, while it's being used, it's something that we're trying to get away from, just because we are advocating for safe wandering and giving that person with dementia still the ability to go outside. So the more positive distraction redirection strategies that we're really starting to promote now is different things such as the buddy system. So a lot of persons with dementia, they love to go for walks. I love to go for walks. So being able for them to be able to go out, but making sure that they always have someone with them is another key component. Giving them something to do is also something that's so important, especially with those with dementia. They don't know what they want to do. And of course, sometimes it can be burdensome to many care partners and clinicians, but if we're able to find something for them to do, whether it's gardening, whether it's being able to cook, whether it's being able to paint, a lot of cases, by being able to give them some purpose, then they're going to be less inclined to want to be able to go out into the community and potentially get lost. And then even being able to just determine what are their needs. If they're expressing that they want to go out, why do they want to go out? Do they want to be able to see a friend? Do they feel that they need to go to work? There's different ways that we can do it. I know that there was a couple facilities in the Netherlands where they actually ended up having like a mock bus stop. So if someone with dementia wanted to go out and they wanted to go somewhere, they'd actually go and sit at the bus stop, and then they would have a bus that would come in, that pick them up, and then just bring them around the block. But at least it gave them that purpose, or it gave them that sense of doing something rather than them just sitting and looking at a TV or playing board games all day. And then, of course, while there's all these different types of proactive strategies that we can try to use, of course, what happens if the person with dementia happens to get lost? We really need to try to be prepared for this as much as possible. And so there's this identification form, and it's actually available on the Alzheimer's Society of Ontario, their Finding Your Way website. By being able to have an identification form, this is absolutely critical for police. When someone gets lost and goes missing, pretty much the police need the information as soon as possible so they can start to go through the different process of sending the police to the home, figuring out what's going on, and then being able to send out a search and rescue team if they need to. And unfortunately, it takes time to collect that information. So something that the Alzheimer's Society of Ontario, and I know this is a movement around the world now, is by being able to keep information such as the person's name, having their physical appearance, having a picture of them, and being able to have that ready on the side. So in the event that they do get lost, you can immediately send it off to the police, is something that, again, it decreases the time that the police need to gather that information. So then it increases the time for the police to be able to go out and try to find that person as soon as possible. So something that we don't want to try to do that. We don't want to imagine that our loved one will get lost and go missing, but it's good to be prepared just in case. And so I know that that was a ton of different information in terms of strategies. That was just a tidbit, a little bit of a taster, but of course there's opportunities for me able to talk about this further. Now to try to conceptualize it and make it a little bit more simpler for you. So this is a conceptual model that I made during my thesis. This is very complicated, I know, in form, but basically from all those different interviews that I did, this infographic really just depicts the sheer complexity that comes with choosing a strategy. It is more than just choosing a GPS strategy or, as a clinician, being able to prescribe a given technology. There's many different components that we really need to keep in mind before we make a decision. So things such as the perception of risk. How high do they see the risk of getting lost? Geography. I've seen many differences between rural and urban communities, where urban communities, and I'm one of them, I don't really know who my neighbor is, and so I'm less inclined to involve my neighborhood. Versus within the rural community where my husband's from, in northern Alberta, the entire community knows who everyone is. In so many cases, that entire community is more than willing to be able to keep a lookout for them, versus those of us in urban centers, we're more inclined to use things like GPS devices. And then, of course, cultural and personal factors. While a GPS device might seem great, what if they have a bad experience with technology? We know many older adults, even for myself, there's certain technologies that I might be less inclined to give a try because it might seem complicated. We need to keep those questions in mind, because if they're not all for technology, then don't push the GPS device on them. There's a ton of other different lower tech solutions that can be used. And then, of course, personal experiences and then other personal factors are all critical components that we have to think of. Isolation is another piece. There's more and more older adults with dementia that I know of that are living on their own. And so that becomes a completely different challenge as to how we can propose a strategy that would keep them safe, even if they're by themselves. And then, of course, there's that massive stigma with dementia. With some of the GPS devices, while they might look okay, such as the Safe Tracks one, where it's sitting as a watch on your wrist, it's bulky. It tends to scream that there's something wrong with them. And so it's something that we're really trying to change within industry, is how can we get rid of that stigma? How can we just make it look like a piece of jewelry if they are wearing a GPS device, just to make sure that people are not afraid to use it because it's going to advertise that there's something wrong with that person or that they do live with dementia. And so with all those different strategies, something that we'll be able to simplify for those of you that are on the line is I developed something called the Canadian Guideline for Safe Wandering. So I developed 3 different versions. So the one that you see on the screen here is the community version. And basically, the way that it involves is I was able to split it up into 4 different risk levels. So you have low risk, you have medium, and then you have unplanned absence. So a nicer word of the person's missing. And then below that, what I've done, and again, all this has about 5 studies that are embedded within this work right now. Below each risk level, I have a check mark box, and basically it has different considerations, different behaviors that might put that person with dementia at a specific risk of getting lost. And below that, I have just a generic terms in terms of the different types of strategies that people can use. I've also been trying to add in different types of language. So you know that people need to be aware that just because someone might be at a low level of risk of getting lost, it doesn't mean that they're not going to go out into their community for a walk and have no idea where they are all of a sudden. So going from lost to now missing. So people just have to be aware that they can go from one level of risk to another at any moment. So just being prepared for all the different risks or all the different levels. And then as well as just trying to promote this, encourage this aspect of safe wandering. How can we let them still be able to do the things that are most meaningful to them while still trying to ensure that they stay safe? And so the other version was the persons living with dementia. I was surprised that this is actually one of the first of its kind in terms of we have a ton of resources for care partners, but we don't have a lot for persons with dementia themselves. And from those that I involved in my past studies, they said that they wanted something for themselves. They wanted to be an active agent in their own care. So I was able to tweak the language, and a lot of the strategies that I've suggested for these individuals are strategies that persons with dementia are using as we speak across the country. So they're quite effective. Unfortunately, though, with the strategies on this guideline is that there is quite a lack in terms of the evidence based on these strategies. So while we're more so focusing on anecdotal evidence with the hopes that we can do more research to really see is there one that's more effective than others when a person with dementia is using that strategy specifically for themselves. And then the other one, the other different version that I developed was for care facilities. So again, that different type of languaging, different type of strategies. I just really wanted to make sure that there was a guideline that can apply to as many people as possible. And then basically it acts as a 2-pager. So if you look at the back page, it does have the links so you can get access to all these other all the different strategies that are suggested. So really it becomes a one-stop shop. It's available on the Finding Your Way website. And then for many of the other organizations, in the Alzheimer's Society of London is one of them, where I have it available on Google Slides. So basically what I do is if I update them, I update it onto their slide directly, so it's always up to date. And there are intentions, I just applied for funding very recently on trying to make this more an interactive version. So there's a lot more work that I can add in to make these guidelines even more effective. As a researcher, of course, when I develop a guideline, I want to see, is it truly effective? Is it valid? So just to share with you a couple quotes so far from this work, it was launched about a year ago. One of the social workers had shared, I thought this is what we need. We needed sort of a way of guiding people through a conversation to help them decide what they need. So I was really excited about it. And then one of the persons with dementia had said, well, when someone's first diagnosed, it gives them something to take home and look at and read and process. So it helps us be proactive in our own care. I was afraid because they were talking about me going into a facility, so that created a lot of stress for me. And that's something that was so real across many of the persons with dementia, where a lot of them actually delayed the process of getting diagnosed because they thought that they were going to get locked up right away. So again, the work that we're trying to do, we're trying to change that. How can we make sure that they get diagnosed, that we have practice strategies, and they don't have that assumption that locked doors will be coming their way? And then in a very recent study, we ended up implementing the guideline across the province of Alberta through the Alberta Alzheimer's Society, as well as across a series of different care facilities in the province. And basically, again, the general impression of the guideline when they were implemented for 2 months, they felt that the reference to the technology options and the guidelines, they found it to be quite positive. They learned about resources they didn't even know about. And then overall, they felt that it was quite simple and easy to read, which was exciting. And when they received this guideline, it actually had already undergone 21 iterations from the different partners I've worked with. So again, I was happy that I have a good product now after the amount of changes that had to be made while I was developing this. And then of course, there's different methods of being able to use the guidelines. So some of them feel that they're using it a lot right now just as a handy handout to pass off to care partners. They're also using it as a way of being able to increase awareness. So the First Link program in the province, they're trying to use that just to make people be more aware of what wandering is and what types of strategies can be used. It can also be used to really gauge the risk that someone might be at in terms of getting lost. And even just with new staff coming in for some of the Alzheimer's societies, it said that they can use it as a training tool to just really increase the awareness and the changing of getting away from locked doors and looking at proactive strategies. So I know that was a ton of information. So now I'm just going to share with you quickly a couple initiatives that I had going on over the last little bit. Oops. So the first one is this rapid response project. So this is something that I've been a part of. This project's been around for the last 2 years now, so fairly recent. While a lot of the techniques and strategies I had done over the last 5 years had focused on the care partner, the clinician, the person with dementia themselves, of course, something that we always need to keep in mind is that police are just as important in terms of they're the ones that have to go out into the community and try to find the person if they are truly lost and missing. And unfortunately, what the Alzheimer's Society of Ontario learned, and I had even seen during my journey, was that police aren't being educated enough. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to approach someone with dementia. So in 2018, an advisory committee was created. It involves police officers from throughout the province of Ontario. There's myself with the research perspective. We have a person with dementia. We have Ron Bellino is involved in everything, so he's also on there as well as Alzheimer's Society representatives from throughout the province. And this initiative has been amazing so far. Basically what we've done is we've been able to create a police resource that we first launched last year. So the police can go on the Finding Your Way website and they can actually learn more about what they can do when they're addressing someone with dementia that's lost and has gone missing. We're currently working on developing a series of education videos for police, and because again this is the only work that's being done throughout the entire country, there's a lot of intentions of being able to open it up to the other provinces so we can start to educate more police, as well as being able to open up to other first responders. So paramedics are not getting educated on this topic, and the same thing with firefighters. So again, it's future directions with this group, but it's so promising, and there's been a lot of work that's been done in the short 2 years that this initiative has been around. And then, of course, there's been other work that we've done outside of some of just the more tangible strategies, the topic of silver alerts. BC right now is dealing with a lot in terms of a further demand for silver alerts, just because there was a gentleman that went missing about 2 weeks ago, and unfortunately they found his body on Monday. He was East Indian, and unfortunately when they found him, it has really caused a ripple within the East Indian community within Alberta and within British Columbia, to the point that in the span of 72 hours of one of the family members posting on the change.org website a petition for a silver alert, they have actually now to this date surpassed 15,000 signatures. And that was in just over 72 hours. And so I actually just had a meeting with the Alzheimer's Society of BC yesterday, just in trying to determine what can we do in terms of silver alerts. What people don't know is that while silver alerts might seem like it's successful when we end up looking at amber alerts when a child goes missing, unfortunately, what you've just been able to discover from this webinar is that a missing older adult happens a lot more than a missing child. So while it might seem great to be able to alert the entire public, imagine your phone going off 7 to 8 times in Toronto. It would drive people crazy. And I had already heard stories from police that people were already calling with one of the recent Amber Alerts, that people were just upset that they're being woken up in the middle of the night. So this has really been a focus for us, just because there's been so much attention as to people saying alert systems could potentially work. So we're really trying to be able to come up with different solutions. Some of them we've already been able to just explore. So one is called CASAP, something that we developed last year. We're just waiting for it to turn into a company, but basically it's based in the community. People volunteer, they sign up, and then they can receive an alert. And it's very much regional. And then there's other ones around the world that are starting to pop up that I've actually been speaking to because of the Consortium. So there's the Purple Alert in Scotland. If you're interested in that, feel free to check them out. They've received more than 10,000 downloads so far, and it's been quite fascinating with their journey. And then there's another one in called Safeland in Sweden. So there's definitely, there's an increasing number of these different types of alert systems, but there's really a lot of unknowns right now. So it's something that our team is really trying to address over the next little while, as to how do we come up with an alert system that can work across Canada. And so I'm going to skip through this just for the purpose of time, but basically when we're talking about silver alerts, there's a lot that we need to keep in mind when we're sending off information to the public. Again, it's very sensitive information. Imagine having the person's name, their face, having that stigma that's attached to dementia, and then alerting the entire province that their loved one's gone lost and gone missing. It's just something that isn't going to work. So something that, again, we're just trying to toy around with. But then ultimately, though, safety does trump privacy. So this is something that in past consultations we've done, people are really discussing that, again, if the person's lost and has gone missing, again, potentially these different alert systems could be used to find them. So we have to tend to evade or get rid of privacy if we do want to keep them safe. But again, this is something that we've been really trying to explore. So I have no answers so far as of yet. So finally, to talk about this International Consortium on Dementia and Wayfinding, it's something that I co-founded 2 short years ago. I ended up meeting another student out of the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. She was doing work very similar to myself. And so her and I had a Zoom chat 2 years ago as of January, and we learned that we had a lot of things that were in common. And what we were shocked with was that while this issue is happening around the world, no one is actually talking about this in terms of us being a community. We're all very much working in silos. And as a result, there's many different repeats of strategies, techniques that were being done. At the time when I was developing this guideline as part of my thesis, I came to learn that Calgary, just 3 hours south of me, was they had an organization that was developing a guideline very similar to mine. And again, there was the same thing where someone was trying to develop another guideline in another country. And rather than us developing these different types of guidelines, really, can we work together to come up with something that could be used around the world? So this really sparked our idea of being able to have a consortium. So as of right now, we have more than 10 countries that are involved, and it's constantly growing. We have a website, which is exciting. It's very interdisciplinary, just again to reflect the number of individuals that are affected by wandering and getting lost. So from persons with dementia, industry, students, community organizations, you name it, they are a part of this. We have more than 80 members. And we did launch it last year, where we did almost like a little bit of a roadshow. So we ran a meeting in Calgary last February. We did another one in Edinburgh, Scotland a month later. And then we also did one at the Missing Persons Conference in Liverpool. And it's been really successful so far. And something that is a new initiative that we're doing, I just launched it as of yesterday, is that the consortium, we're running a summer webinar series. So it's starting June 18th. It goes until July 30th. It's every Thursday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So it's not a super crazy time for you guys, unlike other people around the world. But basically, we've been able to split it across multiple different areas. So June 18th, Katie and I are launching it, kind of giving everyone more of an interest to who we are. June 25th, we have the policing perspective. So we have police from Sweden, from the United Kingdom, as well as from Canada, sharing their experiences about wandering and getting lost and what the police in these different countries are doing to address this issue. We have a technology perspective. So we have the gentleman who's running the Purple Alert in Scotland, he'll be there. There's a researcher that's actually in Ryerson in Toronto that's focusing on drones. There's another one that's talking about GPS devices, and she's from Ireland. So that one's going to be quite interesting as well. And then we have lived experience. So Paul Lee from Toronto and Christine Thelker, 2 of our Canadian superstars that live with dementia, they'll be speaking. We have lived experience for care partners. We have more of the research perspective from talking about neuroscience or some of the more really fascinating future work that could be done, as well as a final discussion. So it was just launched. So if at any point you're interested at all, feel free to let me know. I will be sharing with you my contact info, and I can send with you the flyer. And as well, just before I move on, so basically the summer series, it will be recorded. So if you can attend it, we're going to be recording it and putting it onto our website. So it's just other opportunities for you to be able to learn more about what's going on, not only in Canada, but around the world on this topic. So some of the key recommendations just for you to be able to digest and think about moving forward is that while I spoke of all these amazing strategies, unfortunately, more research on the effectiveness of wander management strategies is needed. You'd be surprised that there's not a lot of us researchers around the world that are focusing on this. So definitely use the strategies, but we can't tell you what one works better than the other, just because we need more research to be able to back that up. We need more of an awareness campaign that emphasizes the shared lived experience. Research would be surprised that persons with dementia still are not being used enough. We're not including their voices. So something that we're really trying to push for. We need to get away from these reactive strategies. We need to stop waiting for someone to get lost and go missing. We need to have a strategy in place just in case. And we need to make sure that these strategies are tailored. One size does not fit all. We need to really make sure that we understand what the person's getting at, and can we give them a strategy that they're going to use for a long period of time. And then, of course, for us as research, what I've been doing has been quite unique in the sense that I've been developing stuff that's actually being used right away. Us as researchers still tend to have a negative connotation in the sense that we publish and nothing happens. So our work that our team is doing is really starting to move mountains, which we're, again, always super excited about. So the next steps, we're pleased and excited to announce that we received a massive grant through AgeWell. So our past work was funded through them, and now we're going to be funded again for 3 years. But this project over the next 3 years is just focused on this issue. So we're going to be taking the guideline that I developed and then making it more interactive. We're going to take a conceptual model that I briefly shared with you, and we're actually going to turn it into a mobile application so you can check to see what level of risk that person with dementia is at for getting lost. We're planning on creating a national coordinated strategy as to how we can collect data on missing persons with dementia, so we can really use that information to inform policy and hopefully start to subsidize some of these technologies. And then we're also in the process of developing a brief scale that really tells you what technology is more usable or easy to use than another in terms of locating technologies. So that will be developed in the up and coming years that all of you can use if at any point you're interested. And then of course, through our colleagues out of Ryerson, they're a part of this project, and they're more so focusing on the use of drones for police. So very much different ways of us being able to tackle this issue. So my final slide, basically how to get involved. If you are interested at all in any of this work that I described today, I know it was a ton, I know it's probably overwhelming, but there's many ways that you can be a part of this so you can learn more. I could talk about this topic for days or weeks at this point. Basically, you can participate in an online Silver Alert forum. We're actually calling it a witness seminar, and that's going to happen this fall/winter. We're still trying to determine that. But basically, we're planning on bringing in experts from around the world to be able to talk about silver alerts. And we're basically taking that, going to be turning it into a document and then using it to try to inform policy. And it will be available to the public. So anyone can join in and you can hear from the experts and actually ask them questions and really help make a change when we start talking about silver alerts in Canada. You can also join the International Consortium on Dementia and Wayfinding. All it takes is you to be able to email me, tell me you're interested. You can be included in the listserv. And basically you can be a part of it in whatever way you want, whether you want to get updates or whether you want to join the advisory committee, or even if you wanted to be able to share some of your experiences. There's many ways that you can become involved. Our team is known for having community advisory committees. We hate coming up with ideas ourselves. So those advisory committees really make sure that our work is going on the right path. So there's options for you to be available in that. And of course, we're going to have a ton of studies that are up and coming. Even with COVID, we have been able to pivot and make things all virtual. So if you're interested in a future study, again, I can keep you on an email list and keep you updated. So my email is nolana.neubauer@uwaterloo.ca. So you can contact me for that. And then as well, something that I always like to offer is, because education is so important for me, if at any point you want to be able to carry on with some of this, feel free to contact me. I always love to arrange to do a quick little talk. I can do a webinar like what I've done right now to your organization. There's lots of opportunities to be able to just share the word of the work that's being done and how we can change how we address wandering and getting lost. So that is it for me. So I'm going to stop share, and I think we're going to open it up to some questions now.
Great. Thanks so much, Nolana. And I'm just mindful of the time, and hopefully people can stay with us a little bit longer. We do have a question. First question, it is great that you are educating police and moving in that direction. What about PSWs?
PSWs is definitely on the rise for us trying to do that. So yeah, it's basically within the Alzheimer's Society of Ontario, we plan on trying to address that. We're just starting with police just because we knew that the need was there. But with PSWs, even right now, I am perfectly fine. Even if you have a group that you want to hear more about what I've discussed today, I would love to be able to chat about it. I know that PSWs tend to be pushed in the back burner, and we always focus on nurses and OTs, but you guys are the ones that are truly at the forefront of it. So you're critical in trying to keep this population safe.
And I will note too that, and Nolana knows this, we've been doing some safety webinars over the last month and a half, and those are all currently archived on our website. So certainly if you know of PSWs who might need this information, they can watch that at their leisure. I'm just looking to see, but I wanted to just to make a couple of comments, and just a promotion actually, again, as Nolana mentioned, we're going to be talking a bit more about technology. And that will be on June 19th, and that will be, registration link will be up on our website hopefully in the next few days. And she'll be here with a colleague to talk about technology in a broad sense and how that can help to support people living with dementia. And again, I wanted to reiterate again, it was great that you talked about the importance of working with technology partners and looking at making technology a bit more responsive and adaptable for what people's needs might be.
Exactly.
So great. So thank you. So a comment, thank you. And certainly if you have questions for Nolana, again, you have her contact information. We'll be able to post some information on our website. This will be archived on our website, so if you want to share it with someone else, you can watch it in the future, or you can rewatch it because there's so much great information. And just taking a look, we'll keep an eye out for other questions or comments coming in. And just a few things to wrap up. Thank you so much, Nolana, for joining us from Edmonton. And I know that you're very busy. You've got a lot of projects on the go. So thank you for sharing your time with us. And thanks to everyone who joined us today for this webinar. When you leave, you will be asked to complete a short evaluation. So we appreciate if you could take a moment to do that. There's just a few questions, and it does help us to plan for future events. So our next webinar is actually next Friday at 11, and it's Be Prepared, Not Scared. A practical approach to aging and dementia, and we'll have a person who is living with dementia talking about what he's doing, and then also a lawyer talking about how to action some of those things. And registration is currently open on our website. So thank you all again for joining us, and please enjoy the rest of your day. And if you are someone who is participating in the IG Wealth Management Walk for Alzheimer's on Sunday, we will see you online. So that's very exciting. So thanks again, and certainly let us know after this if you have any questions for us.
Thank you so much for everyone that joined in.
Thanks everyone, take care.